Welcome to podcast 2 of Your Body Isn't Broken. Today we're going to talk about why change feels so hard and how to make it easy. Most people don't struggle to change because they lack discipline. They struggle because no one ever taught them how change actually works. I'm Dr. Jamé Heskett, physician, author of The Well Path, and someone who has spent over 30 years helping women understand how their bodies actually work, and more importantly, how to work with them, not against them. This podcast is built on a simple idea. Your body isn't broken. It's simply responding exactly the way it was designed to, based on the environment, signals, and inputs you give it every day. And by the end of this episode, you're going to understand why change has felt so hard and why it can actually become simple, sustainable, and surprisingly doable. Most people have a clear idea of what they want for their health. More energy, better sleep, a body that feels strong and resilient again, to lose weight without constantly thinking about it. And yet, knowing what you want and actually getting there often feel like two very different things. If change were simply about knowledge, most people would already be healthy. We know what to do. Vegetables are good for us. Movement is good for us. Sleep is good for us. But consistently doing it is something else entirely. So if change has felt hard for you, it's important to understand this. That resistance you feel is not a personal failure. It's biology, and it's personal. The human body evolved in an environment that looked very different from the one we live in today. For most of human history, survival depended on conserving energy, avoiding risk, and sticking to what was familiar. Predictability meant safety. Routine meant survival. And your brain and nervous system are still wired that way today. Biologically, change represents uncertainty. And uncertainty requires energy. It requires attention, adaptation. So the body naturally prefers what's familiar, even when the familiar isn't helping you anymore. The brain is constantly trying to become more efficient. Every repeated behavior becomes automated, so it doesn't have to think as much. That's what habits are. They're repeated behaviors that allow you to function without having to make constant decisions. And this is actually a beautiful design, but it also means the brain holds on to familiar patterns, even unhealthy ones, because they feel predictable, safe, and efficient. This is why dramatic overnight change almost always creates resistance. When you try to overhaul everything at once, your food, your workouts, your schedules, your routines, think January 1 resolutions, the nervous system perceives that as a disruption, and disruption feels stressful, not safe. So the body naturally pushes back. It resists the change you're trying to make. Motivation drops, fatigue increases, you start negotiating with yourself, you procrastinate, and eventually you abandon the plan, not because you're lazy, not because you lack motivation or discipline, but because your body is trying to return to familiarity, to safety. This is the biological barrier to change. There is also the human side that keeps change from happening. Most people don't start fresh with change. They carry memories of trying to change in the past, diets that didn't work, fitness programs they couldn't sustain, moments of frustration or shame for quitting what they achieved for a month or a year, promises they made to themselves that they just couldn't keep. So change starts to feel heavy, a mountain that has been too hard to climb, like a restriction, pressure, failure waiting to happen. And before you even begin, your body and mind are already bracing for exhaustion. At the same time, we're constantly being exposed to messages that tell us real change can be achieved with a shortcut. And that appeals to this human experience we've had and our feelings that we are not capable of change on our own. The perfect diet, the perfect supplement, the perfect fitness plan, the magic bullet. Because simple, sustainable change isn't what gets marketed. Urgency is, insecurity is, fatigue is, and fear of failure is. So over time, many people stop believing that they're capable of change through small, consistent actions. But the truth is, the body has been adapting and healing through repeated signals long before our modern wellness culture existed. And this is where everything begins to shift. So if the body resists dramatic change, how do we actually create change that lasts? This is where habits become incredibly important. You know how that one donut every Sunday turned into one donut twice a week, turned into one donut daily? Small changes sneak in and build into big habits. Why doesn't your body resist the donut? Because it became a habit without you knowing it, and habits reduce resistance. Bam, daily donut habit. Habits lower the energy required to repeat a behavior. And eventually, what once felt too small to matter becomes part of your life in an automatic way. This is why small, seemingly insignificant actions lead to big biological change. The first principle I teach my clients is this: don't start with what you think you should do or what everyone who has achieved their goals tells you what they do on a daily basis. They probably don't even realize how far they've come from where they started. I tell my clients, start with what feels possible, even enjoyable. Because if something immediately feels overwhelming or restrictive, your nervous system will completely resist it. And resistance breaks consistency. So instead of asking, what's the most optimal thing I could do? Ask, what's the simplest thing I can repeat consistently? Maybe that's a 10-minute walk. Maybe it's a 5-minute walk. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water before your coffee in the morning. Maybe it's eating a more balanced breakfast or a little bit more protein at lunch. Maybe it's going to bed a little earlier. Even just by 5 minutes. Simple is enough. Simple is sustainable. The second principle is to connect new habits to routines that already exist, because the brain loves familiarity. Familiarity is safe. So instead of creating an entirely new system, which feels unsafe, you build onto what's already there. A walk after school drop-off, stopping at the gym on the way home from work. Your existing routine becomes the anchor, and the new behavior starts to feel natural instead of disruptive. If you drive your child to school every day, put sneakers on instead of slippers, and you can anchor your walking to your habit of school drop-off. The third principle, repetition before perfection. Most people try to optimize too early, but repetition is what teaches the body this is our new normal. And over time, something important begins to happen. The habit stops feeling like effort. It becomes part of who you are, not through force or heroic efforts, not through dramatic transformation, but through repetition, small signals repeated over time. And I've seen this work over and over again with the women I coach when nothing else has. And this is very gratifying, but the one thing that is most surprising to them about their success is not those three principles of habit formation. It's about the power of awareness. Awareness of what their body actually needs is a major pillar in change, and without it, change is not sustainable. Let me give you an example of how this works. Two women can come in with the exact same goal and need completely different approaches. Two clients, both in perimenopause with big jobs, incredibly stressful lives, who wanted to lose weight. The first woman, like so many, she thought she needed more discipline, more restriction, more effort. She came to our first meeting well-versed in all the noise influencing her perspective on herself and what needed to be done. She was already at step 5, and the first 4 steps were on someone else's plan that she saw on Instagram. So we walked it back a little bit, and instead we focused on these small daily signals in front of her. Her sleep, her stress, her movement, her nourishment, her consistency. And in the beginning, the biggest shift was simply helping her become aware of what her body was telling her from all those things. About 90 days later, she walked into my office, showed me the number on the scale, and then she started tearing up. Not because of the weight, but because she realized, I feel so good. I feel so strong. I feel like I can do anything. And it was so much easier than I thought. And what struck me most was this. If she hadn't stepped back from where she thought she should be beginning at step 5, someone else's path, heroic efforts, she never could have achieved that outcome in a sustainable way. Because the transformation was so much deeper than the weight loss. And when she tried to give me some credit, I had to remind her that she did it. She learned how to listen to her body. Listening and not blindly jumping to what she thought she should do created awareness. From the awareness, she built change. She made small changes consistently until big change was only a small step from the day before. She couldn't believe it would work. It was just too easy. She built trust in herself and her body. I was just there to show her how change actually happens, and now she's on a completely different path, one she created herself. The second woman came to me with the same goal. She wanted to lose weight too, but she said something very different. She said, I want this to feel enjoyable this time. She had already tried to jump to step 5 as someone else's path, only to fail because it wasn't enjoyable for her. So before we even focused on weight, we focused on what that meant. And she realized she needed energy first. Efforts were draining, not enjoyable, and therefore not sustainable. But that's what everyone says I have to do, she says. Nope, that's simply not how change works. So we started with awareness. Not calories, not restriction, not intense workouts, just understanding how her daily life was affecting her energy. And within a few weeks, that awareness built perspective, and she identified the stressors that were quietly draining her energy, things she had normalized for years. So instead of forcing weight loss through the same strategies that didn't work for her in the past, but that she had accepted as the only way, we addressed what was draining her energy first, and only then did her body begin to respond differently. 2 women, same goal. Completely different starting points, but the right starting point for real sustainable change. And what these stories show is this: change does not happen through big leaps or heroic efforts, more discipline or magic bullets. It happens through self-awareness. Self-awareness followed by small, consistent shifts based on that self-awareness. Shifts that are anchored to habits that are already integral to your life. Now the body responds instead of resists. Becoming aware of what your body actually needs, quieting all the noise about what you are told your body needs, and cultivating that awareness is the missing link for so many women. In the next episode, I'm going to walk you through how to begin developing that awareness so you can start identifying what works for you in your life, in your body, so you can finally realize sustainable change. Because that's where this really becomes yours. So if change has felt hard in the past, it's not because you're incapable. It's not because you don't have enough discipline. It's because you've been trying to do it in a way the body doesn't respond to, and with strategy built on a one-size-fits-all message. And when you begin working with your body instead of against it, change becomes not only possible, but sustainable. I look forward to continuing on this journey with you.